Hello, everyone. Happy Friday morning. Annika,
Hello.
Allison, Joe.
Hello.
Hope
Hi.
everybody's had their coffees.
Morning.
How many coffees or caffeinated beverages have people had by show of fingers today? Two? Two. Okay, we're good
Three.
to go.
As I
We're
as
good
my
to go.
the higher my number goes, the more I'm good.
Yep.
So we're here on Friday morning to talk about parenting and lawyering, and I'm really excited to have this crew here with me. Just to start, my name's Sarah Forte. We're going to have some more introductions as we go, but I'd like to just start as sort of the informal host of this session by doing a territorial acknowledgement that's situated to the lands that I'm on here as host, which is the unceded and ancestral territories of the Semiahmoo, Tsawwassen, Katzie, and Kwantlen First Nations. And I don't think we can start a session about parenting without acknowledging the historical and present day harms that have happened to Indigenous people here in Canada through the involuntary separation of children from their families. And I know as a parent myself, that's something that I really that really resonates, and I think it will for many people that are listening today. And that's through the residential schools, through the 60s scoop, but also through something that's happening more recently, which is the birth alerts. And I would encourage you, if that's something you've not heard about before, to do a little bit of research on your own. But essentially, it is um, Indigenous mothers are showing up in hospitals to give birth, and they've been flagged, and their newborn babies are being taken away from them. So, this is in this session about parenting. I think that's an important point to acknowledge, and before we move on into the session. So, why this session today? I was thinking about why I did this, had this idea to have this session, and reach out to Annika, and then pulled Joe in. And it really brought to mind to me very recently this week. I was talking to a group of undergraduate students who were prospective law students, and I was at a small table discussion. And one of the students literally said to me, "Everyone tells me that I shouldn't go to law school if I want to have a family." And this was not the first time I've heard this, and I'm sure it won't be the last time I've heard this. And it's very hard for me to hear that as a parent and a lawyer, but I'm also grateful when I'm able to speak with someone and they raise that with me, because then I can dispel the myth. So that's what we're here to do today on a much bigger scale for the folks that I don't have a chance to sit down with at a table to talk about parenting and lawyering and how it is possible. Um, because the alternative is we see entire groups of people self selecting out of our profession before they even get in the door. Um, so you can have a full and fantastic life that includes a meaningful law career and an active family life. And that's what we're here today to talk about. It's not always pretty, it's not always easy, but it is possible. And so Joe and Annika are here, and I are here to share some of the things that we've learned along the way. Um, I want to just give a shout out to a recent Bar Talk magazine. Coincidentally and conveniently, there was a feature on parenting in Bar Talk just this last month. So Allison is going to share some links to three articles that were in that Bar Talk magazine from BC lawyers. I just have to give one quote to start the day, and this is from Sonali Sharma. Um, and she wrote an article, and this was her quote: "Becoming a lawyer, like becoming a parent, is a shift in a person's identity. Both test a person's confidence, trigger anxieties and feelings of self doubt, resulting in countless nights with little to no sleep, coupled with endless Google searches." And I thought that was a slightly humorous, in like a funny because it's true kind of way to start off our panel today. So thanks for that, Sonali. Um, in terms of this session and our perspectives, you're going to hear a little bit from each of us about where we're situated in parenting and lawyering in our professional and personal lives. But I also just want to acknowledge that we are far from able to speak for all parent lawyers. And each of us can only speak to our experience. What we don't have today is single parents, queer parents, parents of children that have disabilities, and there's so much more about this topic to talk about that I would love to see future sessions address. And maybe if this LinkedIn Live works, we'll do that. Before we get into our panel introductions, I'm just going to give a quick intro to our moderator, as well as our behind the scenes person who you don't see here. So our moderator is Allison Hill. Allison, if you can give a little wave. Allison has a degree in kinesiology and is a recent law grad. She's done some contract work for me over the last few months that has on legal and marketing research and has just been absolutely top notch. So I commend her, and whoever manages to grab her for articles will be very lucky. Allison will be off screen most of the time, but she's going to be monitoring the chat for questions, and she will pop on and ask questions as we're able today. So please do put your questions in the chat, and welcome, Allison.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here.
Awesome. And then behind the scenes is Emma Gittens. So Emma has a long career of directing primetime TV news and somehow is here with Annika and Joe and I today to direct our little mini LinkedIn Live. So we have an embarrassment of skill behind the scenes. Emma has pivoted to doing social media content and video production for various industries, but has a special interest and experience with law firms. So Allison's also going to throw in the chat a link to Emma's website if anyone's interested in getting support. So I'm going to just roll now into the introductions of each panelist. I'll just introduce myself really quickly and then pass it along. So my name's Sarah Forte. I have been called to the bar for 21 years, which is astounding. I am a labor and employment lawyer, always have practiced exclusively in that little niche area. At this point, I'm very confident I'm never leaving it because I am too far in my career to learn anything new, is my opinion. I have 3 kids. They are 18, 16, and 12 currently. And so I have been lawyering and parenting for 18 years. And my first child was born in my second year of practice. So I have had a deep and long experience, but also all of those early year things are completely memory wiped. So I'm very happy to have Annika and Joe here who can speak more directly to that before they too forget about it all in a few decades from now. I have worked in big firm environments. I worked at a national law firm. I have worked at a small firm, and then I have been running my own firm, Forte Workplace Law, now for 8 years, which has been an interesting experience. And a bit of what I'll try to add to this panel is also a bit of the perspective of an employer of parent lawyers, because it's been very interesting to make that shift. I have a husband. I am cisgendered. My husband is an engineer, not a lawyer, but has another busy full-time job. And I have also an embarrassment of family support, which I'm very lucky and privileged to have. My parents live close by and are very actively involved. And my brother and his family also live very close by and are very actively involved. So we have a little village that is in the scope of about 2 kilometers. So that's me. Maybe I will pass it over to Joe to introduce himself, and then we'll give it to Annika.
Yeah, so I'm Joe Romanowski, for those of you who don't know me. I am a litigation lawyer at Castles, Brock, and Blackwell in Vancouver. And I have a general corporate commercial litigation practice. And I primarily practice in commercial and residential real estate and construction litigation, and restructuring and insolvency matters. I am originally from Calgary. I've been living in Vancouver since 2017, and I'm married to my partner, my wife, who is also a lawyer and was in-house practice, was in private practice as a commercial real estate lawyer for the majority of her career, and has just recently gone in-house just prior to her going on her current parental leave. and will return in-house after her parental leave is over. And so we have two little boys, Hudson, who's 2.5 years old, and our newest addition, Russell, who is 5 months old. And my wife's family is also not in Vancouver. They're on Vancouver Island. So we actually don't have any family in Vancouver, which I think there are obviously a number of parents who are doing it without a family village around them. We fall into that category of parents, and so we are quite fortunate. We have a childcare situation is currently part-time in a daycare and part-time with our very, very lovely nanny, and we are very fortunate to have that option. And because we don't have any family, we rely very heavily on that nanny as an option and some support, and I can touch on that later. But it's a very important part of our parenting journey, is having some very reliable childcare because of that.
Thanks, Joe. Annika, tell us about you.
So I'm Annika. I'm Annika Jawaji, if you don't know me. I have a pretty similar practice to what Joe described, and I work at McEwen Partners, which is one of the litigation boutiques in town. So busy litigation practice. I have a husband who is also a lawyer, who is a partner at a firm in town. So he's got a very busy life as well. And we don't have any, well, actually, I shouldn't say like that. My sister's going to get mad at me, but I have my sister locally, but my sister is also a lawyer, and her husband is a specialist and is always on call. So they have a very busy life. They have 2 kids, and none of our parents live locally. So my husband's parents are in England, and my parents are in Edmonton. I'm originally from Edmonton. So we have a similar situation to what Joe described, where we rely very heavily on our nannies. So we have 2 nannies. One works Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday from 8:30 to 5:30, and the other one works Thursday, Friday from 8:30 to 5:30. So it just so happened that we had someone that we really loved who injured her knee at one point. So we hired someone else that we really loved. And then when the first one wanted to come back, we were like, we love you both. Would you guys just split the week? And it ended up that's where we're at, which actually has a lot of benefits, because I hadn't really thought of that, but if one of them is not available, the other one typically is, which is really amazing. So even actually this week, one of them is not available Thursday, Friday. So the other one is covering for them, and they're part of our little community. And they really are for me, they're like family, because they're really his primary caregiver we have throughout the day. So we have one child. He actually turns 2 next Saturday. And his name's Ariz. So that's my situation. I very kind of I think quite similar to what Joe described in a lot of ways. No family locally, both kind of busy lawyer parents, and the one child. I think one thing that might be unique about my experience is I came back to private practice from more of a in-house sort of call it a more of a lifestyle work-life balance type of role when I was 5 months post maternity leave. So I've been navigating coming back to the crazy world of private practice, very shortly after coming back from mat leave. So that's something that's unique to my circumstance. Yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Annika. I always have a little giggle and I always feel like I'm speaking from the safety of 21 years of practice way out here in the suburbs running my own firm. But I've had my firm described as a lifestyle firm. And the question I put to the person is what is the opposite of that? What are you if you're not a lifestyle firm? I'm not expecting anyone to answer that question, but it's a phrase that always gives me a pause and a giggle from the outer, someone who's climbed all the way down the career corporate ladder and stepped off and built my own, right? It's an
Well, I just kind of giggle because, like, people said to me, "Oh, that was a lifestyle gig," and I thought to myself, "Well, I did that. I did a master's at the same time, and while I was doing my lifestyle gig, I did 2 hearings at 33 and 36 weeks pregnant." So is
Right.
that lifestyle in law? I don't know, but like it definitely was like less crazy than my current sort of situation, but it certainly wasn't. When people say lifestyle, I kind of giggle to myself as well during that time. But for people in law, it's like, oh, you left private practice, so that must have been a lifestyle.
Yeah.
So you get the vibe.
Yeah, I get the
Yeah.
vibe, and
Yeah.
definitely seeing a lot of folks have a lot of different experiences in-house and in private practice with varying degrees of ability to have a full life while working. So let's jump into our topics here. We've got a few topics that we're going to go through, and then we'll sort of intersperse that opportunities for Allison to pop on if there's questions in the chat, and then we'll try to get to more at the end. We are prepared to stay a bit later than 9:45 here. If viewers or other people are still sticking around, if there's questions we haven't gotten to. So the first question we have here is, what factors have affected your parenting and work decisions for your family over the course of your career? And I'd like to start with Joe on that. So Joe, tell us about the factors that have impacted your parenting and work decisions.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think the short answer is there are a lot of factors, and the factors seem, as every new and experienced parent will attest to, the factors consistently change, and new factors pop up, and things you thought were very important are no longer important, which I think is very much in line with parenting philosophy generally, which is it's complete chaos and completely unpredictable at all times, even when you spend your time making it as predictable as possible. But I think the biggest things for me, I mean, I would say obviously are the demands of our home life would be the primary factor that I consider. The support systems, obviously, that I just sort of touched on, but having the support systems that we have available is very significant.
Mm-hmm.
The flexibility that we can achieve with our careers, and what we're willing to. I mean, career milestones is obviously very important, but a big thing is what we're willing to forego or delay based on those career milestones is a big factor. And obviously, living in Vancouver in this day and age, financial considerations are a big part, right? And I think when an example of the demands of home life is our childcare situation. So when we first had a child, we looked at our situation. Both of us were practicing in private practice, and we thought, okay, daycare is sort of the ideal situation. I think for a lot of people, we had daycares close by. Obviously, there are a lot of challenges in Vancouver with daycare in terms of wait lists, and a big thing for us was hours, right? Is it a 9 to 4 thing? Is there more flexibility with hours? Another thing is, just from what we hear anecdotally from other parents, is the time that parents have to carve out for daycare closures or children being sick and having to stay home from daycare. And a lot of times we hear people rely on some of those support systems they have with family. If their child is sick and needs to come home early, if they're in a pinch, they can rely on a family member to go pick up their kid and hang out with their kid until you're able to go. And we didn't have any of that. So, for us, the nanny route, we were very fortunate enough to be able to do that. And that was what made sense for us, right? I mean, we could rely on a nanny in is a lot more predictable in terms of the availability. I mean, subject to obviously, illnesses and that sort of, and holidays and things that pop up for our nanny, but it was a lot more predictable, we thought, than daycare. Now we do some daycare because we were on a wait list before our first son was born for our first son, and we got in to that daycare when he was 2, and they have a preschool there. But in order to get to the preschool, you have to be in the daycare. So they said, well, we have a spot available, and we thought, okay, well, now our son is going to be going to to the preschool in a year, so let's put him into the daycare part-time, just to get that spot. And then our nanny was, it just really happened to line up nicely that our nanny was okay taking a step back and doing some part-time work to spend some more time with her family just for that year, until our new baby was ready for, and my wife was going back to work, and new baby was ready for care. So, that was a big factor. I also consider mentorship as a big factor in terms of decisions. So for me, role models and mentors, I now, before I had children, I based it on basically career aspirations and things I saw that those people could help me achieve, and I could help them. And with respect to careers, now I look for mentors and role models who are working parents, because that if that is how I think I can get the absolute most value out of that relationship. It's really important. Obviously, there are some mentors I have that don't have children, but the values are information experiences are just very different. And then really, I think in terms of career milestones, I had made a very difficult decision to essentially delay my entrance into a partnership for family reasons, and for me it was I think some people will really prioritize that career milestone. For us, my prioritization was our family's needs at the time, and so I was okay with delaying that and changing my priorities after having a family. And then I think really ultimately, just with financial considerations, it was how can we afford the childcare, afford a place to house all of our family, and it really is a higher consideration for me now than I think it would be if I didn't have the same financial obligations in Vancouver. I think those are primarily the biggest factors for me in how I've made decisions.
Good
Turn it
info.
over to me.
Throwing it over to you, Annika.
Okay, I was like, is it my turn yet?
Yeah,
No.
it's your turn. We can't wait to hear
I
from
actually,
you.
as Joey was saying things, I was writing things down because I said, oh my God, these are all such good ideas and things that resonate with me. And I didn't think about talking about any of them. But yeah, like a lot of what Joe was saying, like really resonates with me. Like I think before, so I think I'm a bit like unique, well, maybe not unique in this sense, but like I was definitely someone who was very career oriented, and all I really cared about was really career before I had my child. And I really was someone who could have gone either way with having children. I was very like, oh, well, I think that's a very valid choice. I just was very like, all I want to focus in on is career and all of my goals and all of my other projects. I've got other things on the go that I really enjoy. And so I sort of had this idea that, okay, like, we'll have the one, and everything will sort of stay, similar, and I'll just keep on trucking on. And of course, like, having a child like fundamentally fully shifts your perspective and shifts your life and your goals and everything that you thought you knew about yourself. So I think for me, like, the factors that I had in mind when I was pregnant are very different than like what I consider now as a parent. So I still am I'm sort of surprised at myself in some ways. Like I still am very much ambitious and like want the things that I wanted before, but I feel so calm, like Joe said, about just saying like, this isn't for me right now, and that's okay. And or like, you know, if an opportunity, like when I think about like the factors that affect my decision making now, if a really great opportunity comes along now, I used to be the person who would always be like, yeah, for sure, I'm in. And I'm like, no, Annika, like, you know, that's gonna, I really think through it. And I think like, do I want to do this? Is this something I want to give my time to? Because it's going to be time away from my son at the end of the day, right? So I do that weighing exercise with absolutely everything now. So when I think about all the factors that affect my parenting decisions, like a lot of it comes down to my mental and my physical health. So, for example, I told my husband when we had kids, like, that's one thing I'm not willing to compromise on. And I feel like I always come back to what's going to be the best decision for my mental health and my physical health. Because if I'm in a really good spot, I'm going to be a really great parent. So, for example, like when we made the decision about nanny versus daycare, I know that I'm someone who's just prone to getting sick, and I feel like Joe's probably laughing to himself because he knows that about me too. Because I was always like, oh, I have the sniffles like the whole time we were in law school, but that's just me. Like if someone's going to get sick, it's going to be me, and we know that about me and this family. So we were like, you know what? If it means that we do less, you know, fun holidays and all of that stuff that was important to us before, and have, you know, really good childcare every day here at home, that's the decision that we're going to make. Another, you know, factor that I really think about is elder care. Like my parents are in Edmonton, my husband's parents are in England. So, you know, when I was thinking about how am I going to juggle childcare and elder care and all of these things together, all of those factors like really played into my decision of what firm I went to. I knew I wanted to go back to private practice, but I really thought about that, you know, like what can I, where can I be where I can still be really achieving my goals and feel really good about what I'm doing, but I'm also able to, you know, factor in all of these other things and the flexibility that I'm going to need in order to manage childcare and elder care responsibilities, which are just becoming, you know, more and more for me at this moment. And I knew that. So that was a big factor because, you know, when I was thinking about going back to private practice, there was a lot of places where I was like, oh, that would be so amazing. And then I'd really think through like, well, what's that going to look like? Am I going to, you know, and I was very, I think one of the things that I did that I would never have done before was be very full disclosure with employers as I was interviewing. And I'm typically a full disclosure person, but like to the extent of like, I will need a lot of flexibility. I will need, like, if you want someone who's going to come in, do a really good job, like really care about their career and like really like giver, like I'm your gal, but that comes with boundaries and consequences now. Like I'm not going to be able to do the kind of hours that I was able to do before. So like, because I was really thinking about all of those factors when I made a lot of the decisions that I made. And like, yeah, so I mean, I'm kind of bleeding a little bit into, you know, boundaries and other topics we're going to be talking about, but like I was thinking about all of those things when I made all of my decisions, like elder care, child care, my husband's career, you know, what are we going to do if because he's a solicitor and I'm pretty heavily like into the hearing room, trial work, that kind of thing. How are we going to navigate all of that? I need to be at a firm that allows me, you know, flexibility to be able to work from home on certain days of the week, make my own schedule. And that's not every firm in town. So I think all of those things really mattered for me. Finances was a huge factor as well. Like, I'm so much more committed to making money than I've ever been before. Because like honestly, like in this city, like to, you know, provide for children and to do it in a way that like supports my mental health is very expensive. And, you know, I have a friend who says to me like, Annika, anything, just outsource it. And I do that now. Like, you know, I outsource like meal prep, like I get, you know, salads delivered to the firm, I get fresh prep, like all of those things cost money. And so I'm just like, I'm just even more committed to that. But yeah, finances was a really big factor in making a lot of our decisions about, you know, me going back to, like, just to be completely honest, me going back to private practice, that's a financial decision as well, right? Like we have family now. Family comes with you know, other obligations, and that was a major factor that I thought about. So yeah,
Love it. Love it.
yeah.
I love that both of you guys talked about money. I think there's such a silence around money. I know in our Not Your Average Law Job project that I know Annika's been profiled on. If you ever anyone wants to check that out, Allison, maybe you can throw the Not Your Average Law Job link in the chat. You know, one of the limiting factors people have in terms of their mobility in the profession is money, and some of that is perceived, and but a lot of that is also very real. And so I think the more we can talk about that openly, the better. And I appreciate that. I just, you know, will add just a couple of things. One, I loved what you said, Joe, about a mentor, like finding mentors. And I think, you know, one thing I've seen over the sort of course of my career is like a change in the availability of role models who have the kind of life that you would like to have. And I think a lot of students or lawyers starting out at firms, you know, one of the reasons I hear when people are thinking about leaving is, I don't see anyone there that has the life that I want to have. And so I love that you're actively seeking out role models and finding them, because I think that's a real shift we're seeing in the profession. And it's really, that's going to be part of what's going to drive change, is people, you know, one of our mandates behind Not Your Average Law Job is like, I want people to expect to have a great life and expect it and not accept anything less. And so to have that, you have to have that role model and that hope and see it being done. I think one of the things, I think maybe it was you that was talking about it, Annika, but one of the things I think about a lot in my career is the positive no. And I just a plug for the CBABC, Angela Rinaldi's article talked about that as well. So, you know, when you're faced with an opportunity, and I think Annika's like me, where a lot of the opportunities are actually things I come up with myself. Like, I'm also the boss, and I'm like, my boss is the worst sometimes. She's like constantly coming up with these projects and dumping them on my lap, right? So a lot of it to me is like no to self. And so what I have to do to maintain discipline is think about like, okay, by saying yes to this, I am saying no to something else, because that is the world, right? Or by saying yes to this right now, I'm saying no to something else right now. And so really doing a lot of reflecting, and there's a book on that called The Positive No that I think is really helpful in making those kinds of choices and reframing it from I'm negative, I'm saying no to things, I'm losing opportunities, to like I am leaving space for other opportunities or things that are more important to me than this current one. And the last thing I'll just reflect on is, as someone who's been like lawyering and parenting for a while, is I have really noticed with my own trajectory seasons in my career. And I spent about 7 years in each of my career phases so far, at a big firm, at a small firm, and running my own firm. And it was, you know, when I made this decision to leave the big firm, you know, I had people saying like, oh, I guess it wasn't a good fit for you, or it was a bad experience. And it was like, no, actually, it was a great fit for me. And until it wasn't anymore, because my life had changed, my needs had changed. Some of the perks and advantages of working there, I wasn't able to access anymore. And I needed a different deal and set of parameters. And I think that my hope within our profession is we can all be more open to change and do the kind of intentional thinking that you guys both talked about, which is so exciting for me to hear about people really thinking about intentionally building their careers and realizing they have a long time ahead of them, you know, knocking on wood. But, you know, this is a long career. And you don't have to do just because you're not doing something right now doesn't mean it's not important to you.
I think also like on like the mentor piece, like I think that was so great what Joe said on that. Like for me, like I'm really trying, and it's kind of like the opposite of my nature to be that person for the younger lawyers, like in the sense of like I have to check myself and say like, Annika, you're working too much. You're here too often. You're doing too much, because this is not who you are, and that's not what you want the younger lawyers to see, that's a normal thing to do. Because like my sisters call it whole hog Annika style, like where it's just like we're doing everything, you're in, well, and it's like I have to be like, no, Annika, we're not doing that, because that's not setting that kind of like, because what Joe said really resonated with me, like having those role models that really look and have the life that you have, that hasn't really been something that I've had in a lot of ways. So I'm trying to now be that person in, in what like the commercial litigation bar doesn't like, that's not really the norm, right? People are just very like, that law is all you do, litigation is all you do. And in order to be a good litigator, you have to like eat, breathe, and do this, and that's it. And I think to an extent, like that is true when you're in a file. And sometimes it's just you're going to trial and you're eating and breathing and living the file, but that doesn't have to be your entire personality. And I think that's been a shift for me, like even just personally being like, no, I have other things outside of this that I like, I think being a parent has really given me like latitude to really explore like other sides of my personality and like other things that I like and enjoy. And like we have a young lawyer who's just come back, like she's had a baby in her like first year of practice, like she'd just gotten called to the bar. And whenever I think about what I'm doing and like the example I'm setting in the office, I think about her, because I'm like, she's watching me because I'm 10 years her senior, and she's taking cues from this. Like, how is Annika navigating this? Is she here till whatever ungodly hour every night, or is she leaving? Is she like, what's she doing? So I think about that example that like I want to set for her, right? Because I think that's really important.
Well, and I think it's really easy to forget as well that it's easier to live that value and manifest the things you want as a working parent when you have some experience and you've built up some goodwill and some equity and some experience and some knowledge in the practice. Like, I think I don't lose sight of the fact that had I been going through this as a junior lawyer in that initial phase of my career when I'm trying to learn and trying to do everything, like that would be I don't know if things would be the same, right? Like I am privileged to be in a position now where I can say no to certain things, and I feel comfortable taking on certain things, or feel comfortable that my value is known to some extent, and that I don't have to be trying to prove myself at every turn and build that point, right? So I mean, it is also, that's why it's more important to seek out those mentors and have those people from an early outset, because it will help you, especially in your early years if you have children, to help you do that. Like, and it doesn't necessarily even have to be like at Castles, for example, we have the Parents of Young Families Affinity Group, and it's a group of lawyers with young families, and they meet all the time, and they do advocacy for each other within the firm internally. But it's also just meeting and talking about things that have impact parents. And it's this great way for people, especially younger lawyer students, that sort of thing, to see all of these people within the firm talk about the struggles, talk about tips and tricks, their experiences. It's not just about law, right? I mean, we have full topics on, and speakers come in about childcare or parenting strategies or things like that, like just to make you feel like you have that. Because apart from just mentors, it's nice to have a community of people, because that's what makes you feel comfortable doing what you're doing.
I love that, Joe. I think, again, thinking back to some of the Bar Talk articles this month, Sonali's was really about building community and how important that is. And I love that your firm has that built in. I think that's a really cool. I've not heard of that happening in our profession within firms. So I think that's awesome. So I want to talk a bit about leaves, because I think this is always a hot topic. Is this a career limiting move? Is this a setback? People, I am now an employer, so I have people taking maternity leaves. I personally have taken 3 maternity leaves. I'm a labor and employment lawyer, so I advise employers and employees about taking leaves, parental leaves, maternity leaves. It's something I've lived and breathed for 21 years. And I think I probably still haven't heard all the worries and questions, but like a bunch of the worries and questions I get from lawyers is like, I'm not going to be able to keep up with the legal developments. Like, I'm kind of going to just get rusty, and then I'm going to come back and like everyone else is going to have moved on from a substantive legal point of view, and I will not know the law anymore. You know, I think there's also concerns about like everyone else will have moved on from all the files. Like I'll come back and I won't know any of the files. I won't know any of the clients. I won't know any of the work. People will forget about me. You know, I'm very vulnerable, and people are very vulnerable when they're on a leave, for sure. So I think those are the kinds of worries that I hear. And I know the three of us have all had experiences with taking leaves, and I'd love to hear maybe from Annika first and then Joe about some thoughts on leaves.
Maternity leave was really different for me in some ways because I wasn't able to defer my master's when I was on mat leave, so I continued doing that when I was on maternity leave, which was I do not recommend. Don't do stuff like that. It's a really bad idea. Like I really just had no choice because the program I was in, the classes I needed to finish were only offered in that year, and if I was to defer, I would have deferred 2 years out. So like it just wouldn't have worked. So I did that, but I so my when I was getting ready to go on maternity leave, I was very in the headspace of like get as much experience before you go because you're leaving for a whole year and that's such a long time. So, you know, like you really need to like do as many hearings as possible, get as much, and you know, so as I mentioned before, I was like insisting on doing like the hearings I had on my calendar at 33 and 36 weeks, which I also don't recommend. Like why? I'm not sure I did that, but I did. So what I would say is that it's actually such a short amount of time. Like I couldn't believe how quickly I took an 11-month maternity leave. It went by so quickly, and I didn't miss anything. Like truly, I didn't miss anything. I was so caught up with like I'm going to miss all of this. All the good files are going to be gone. It's going to be so awful. And I had to work so hard. I really pushed myself way too hard when I was getting ready to go on that leave, just to like be like, remember me when I come back, please. Remember I was good, you know. Like I want to leave with a bang, and I think part of that is good. Like if you feel in the sense of like I at the time I felt I had the capacity to do that, and I think like just speaking as someone who's always been an employee to employers, like if a woman is telling you that like they're really pregnant but they're still like I can do this, like don't tell them no. That's just like not that it just feels very like patronizing and infantilizing. But at the same time, like I think like just if I was to advise my younger self, who like I would be like, you know what, you've got a really long career ahead of you. Like you don't need to just like really prove yourself in this short amount of time. Like people are still going to remember that you were good when you were gone for 11 months because it's such a short amount of time. Like it really is. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the on ramp. Is that the on ramp or the off ramp? The off ramp. Off ramp onto the maternity.
We need all the ramps. So many ramps are needed.
I mean, my on ramp was insane because like I came back and like I was kind of starting to like get back into the groove a little bit, and like it was kind of fine. And then I decided to take this job, and while I'll actually say like my employer was really mindful of trying to like ease me into things, my current employer. There was just so much good work that I just started just like really doing a lot of it. And so I feel like for me, just personally, like I just felt so much more like myself, kind of just jumping back into work, coming back from a mat leave. So like, I think it really is just like such a personal choice. Like I felt comfortable doing that, but I also think like you have to keep checking in with yourself because like you have very different responsibilities. Things look very different on your end, and say like I like at the end of the month, every month I like check my calendar and check like in with just like myself and my health, like where am I feeling mentally and physically, and like am I still going to be able to do what I've committed to doing, and if I'm not, I need to like offload something or talk to someone about something, because I still very much am like in some ways on my on ramp back, right? I've really been sort of back in this for about 7 months, 7-8 months now post baby. in the sense of like, you know, when I went back to the commission, there was like just so much latitude to do like a really sort of like whenever you're ready, you can keep sort of doing your caseload, but that just wasn't the case when I came back to private. And that's not, you know, anything that anyone told me to do. It just felt like it was time to do it, right? So yeah, really hard to navigate. What I would say is like, in terms of challenges I experienced, I really think employers can be so much better with ensuring that people get contribution for like get credit for the work that they have done. I like when they were just going on a mat leave, because I think part of it is like you can work on as litigators, like you can be working on a file for like 2 years and giving it like everything you got. And if you have a baby at just the wrong time, like you're really in the hands of your employer to make sure like you are recognized on that file, like you just are. And you know, like I feel like I struggled with that. Like I had a number of cases that went to hearing like just before I went on mat leave, and you know, I had to like really like make sure my name was on certain things, and you know, things like that, which I really don't think like I think people don't think about it. I don't like, you know what I mean? They're not thinking about you, like you're gone, but if you're someone like me, you're thinking about them. You know, you're like, I don't have access to the system. Like, is this all like, is my, like, I did that hearing, is my name going to be on that? Like, what is this going to look like? And like, I think you could just really take the anxiety off, like very like A-type, high performing kind of people, which is our entire industry. If you just like think about that person when they're away and be like, you know, they really did do a lot of work on this. Like we should ensure that they get that, because at the end of the day, that person's coming back to this career. And all of that, I've heard this from so many women, all of the work that they've done, it's like poof, it just kind of like went away and like everyone forgot about them. And it's really, really hard because you're already in this like bubble in your home with a newborn, and you're like, oh, like you feel like not yourself, right? And then that identity piece of career where like you're like, okay, well that makes sense to me, like, you know, I did good on that, and like I'll get, you know, it could be as simple as making sure like you send an email to that employee, or make sure they're in like the newsletter or whatever on the notable cases that you circulate. Like it's very, I think it takes very little to make that person still feel like included. And like I've heard people say like from the employer side, well, we don't want to encroach on the maternity leave. And it's like, I don't think any person is going to think that like if you acknowledge they did a good job on something while they're on a mat leave, that was like you reached out and ruined their mat leave kind of thing, you know? So like I think that those things are really challenging. I really struggled with that on my maternity leave, but that's something I think that employers can do a lot better with. And I think the other thing that was a challenge is also like this feeling of like when you come back, like as you were saying, Sarah, like a lot of us are like, everyone's moved on, all the files are gone, you know, everything good I was working on is being reassigned and all of that. Like if there's ever an opportunity to bring someone back in the fold on file, do it. It doesn't matter if like it's going to be like a little bit inconvenient that someone else is going to have to come off the file or whatever. Like if it's not going to be a huge issue with the client, do it, because that person knows the file and they're coming back already feeling like a fish out of water. If you can get them back in on something that they understand, and like litigation files go on for like your entire life, I'm sure it's going to be there when they come back. Because there was things that I was like, oh, like I want to get back, oh, but it's gone now, and so-and-so's got it, and blah, 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 blah. Like women who are taking, like I want to see more men taking longer paternity leaves, but like typically right now it's still women who are taking the longer leave. Like they're already coming back worrying about like where work is going to come from. Their identity has changed completely. It would be really great if people could just like get them back involved in stuff that they were doing, or like really prioritize having great quality work waiting for that person when they come back, so they feel like they're like right, not with the pressure of like you must do this for tomorrow, but like, hey, we have a really great file waiting for you. Like this is going to be really great, you know. Would I think
make
would
sure
really,
there's those opportunities
really,
to like get in and get rolling. Yeah.
Yeah, like
I
you know,
love
you don't
that.
want to go back being like, okay, cool, like
like why did I lose the few hours of sleep I could get to come in and
yeah,
sit at my
and
desk?
like I think like
that
just oh sorry, just one, I don't want to jump all over you, but like one thing I was thinking about was like you know how I get when I'm on like a snowball about something. But I'm just thinking about like communication is so key. Like, what does that employee want before they go on maternity leave? I feel like so many employers are like, we're just going to treat everybody the exact same way, just like we don't want any like liability, like this, like no one talk to that person, and like it's very like isolating. And I think like everybody wants a different level of communication when they're on a maternity leave or a parental leave. Like some people really want to be on the loop on things. Some people are really like, no, I'm away. Like, do not contact me. I think like that's a discussion that needs to be had. Like, what is your comfort level about feeling like looped in on things, or just from an informational perspective? Nobody's saying that they want you to like send them work while they're on mat leave, but like, are you going to invite them to events? Do they want to be invited to like the annual barbecue so that they like feel part of the organization? Yeah. Do they not want any contact? And I think that would be a really valuable thing that employers could like do and get some clarity on, so that that person can have like the level of communication that they would like during a leave.
Yeah.
Thanks,
that's it. Yeah.
I love it. You have we could have talked for a whole hour about leaves, I think.
Yeah.
Joe, do you want to chime in a bit on leaves? And then I think Allison's going to pop on to ask a question, and we're a little bit over the time we had allotted, but and we will not talk about this all day, but we will talk about it for about 9 more minutes. So happy to have you chat about leaves, and then just I'll hand it over to Allison.
Yeah, definitely. I think the from the non-birthing parents' perspective, it especially, I think it's getting better now. Like there are some firms who have policies that allow for longer leaves for non-birthing parents, which I think is really great, and I hope that people are taking more advantage of it. I know for me, even being at Castles, one of the very motivating factors was seeing a litigation partner take, I think it was 3 or 4 months of parental leave, and it was like not even it was a very positive thing, and that was very positive to see. But it does have its obviously not the same realm of challenges, but I think I have taken leaves. The last one I took was altogether about 2 months, but usually it's about 5 weeks, or most non-birthing parents get 4 weeks of leave, or typically did. And that, especially in a commercial litigation perspective, has a lot of challenges, I found, because with that short of leave, you're not handing off files, right? And most people, in our line of work especially, a lot of the strategy, a lot of the work is in your head. It's very hard to hand over a complex litigation file to somebody unless you get it to a point, to fully take over and run, right? Like you really have to put in a lot of effort to get it to a point where it can effectively, babysat or managed for that short period of time. And I found that was sort of was very challenging for me, and because you're not able to fully hand these off, it does impact some of your time on that leave and take away from it. So I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned also on the the people who are usually having to take shorter leaves to try and manage those challenges as well, whether it's taking longer leaves and getting things fully handed over, whatever. And it brings a point, I think, maybe we can hand it over to Allison in a second, but I think it does bring one of the points that I hear, especially with leaves, is about the quality versus quantity of time, which sort of bleeds into the next category. And I know that some of us often hear, when it comes to raising kids as a lawyer, it's thinking about quality time versus quantity of time with your children, right? And I think that makes sense in some ways. I've always and my interpretation of it, depending on, it can mean different things, I suppose, to different people. But for me, it has always been, I really prioritize the quality versus quantity of time at work at this stage, right? Because we know that time is finite, and as you were saying, Sarah and Annika, right? You can't do everything all at once, right? Every evening you have X number of hours. you also have work to do. You also have children to Bed Bath and Beyond. You have all of these things, and you have to make a decision one way or the other about how to use that time.
Thank you, Joe. We talked about this in the pre-meeting panel, and I was like, we cannot have this panel without Joe talking about quality versus quantity, because I think that's a really important perspective and kind of flips the script on that a bit. So Allison, if you want to pop on now, I think we've got one last lightning round question, and then we'll close it up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just wanted to say, I know I'm the moderator of this event, but even as a viewer, I'm really enjoying listening to this live. As a young legal professional who plans on having a family one day, this has been very insightful. So that leads me to my question, which we'll do as a lightning round. You've all talked about the challenges of juggling work and parenting. What is one strategy or routine that has helped you find balance as a lawyer and a parent?
Okay, I'm going to go first on this one, and I'm going to say part-time work. I have worked part-time, whether that's 3 or 4 days a week, since 2006. I came back after my first mat leave to 3 days a week. I haven't always been able to work part-time like every week, every month of my entire career, but that has always been my norm that I've come back to. And having that one day, especially once your kids hit school age, where I can reset myself, make appointments, volunteer at school, do whatever the other things that I want to do, like have a nap, read a book, um, is that's been just a game changer for me, and something that's allowed me to continue in the minority of mothers who are still in private practice after 21 years. Annika, what's your hot tip?
Work from home 2 days a week. Block off between 5 and 8 o'clock in my calendar. It says parenting, do not contact unless incredibly urgent. That's every single day, and that everyone sees that when they log into my calendar. And lastly, reduce your billable expectations of yourself when you have young children. You're not going to be able to bill like you used to bill, and that's okay. It's a season of life. Those are my hot tips.
Joe, close us off.
Yeah, I think, part of it falls into the quality versus quantity. For me, it is being a lot more thoughtful about the things that I use my time for at work. So when I come into the office, a lot of us, especially in litigation, struggle with, maybe you have a lot of work and you're trying to balance that with a number of different firm initiatives and all of these things. And I think there's a time and a place for everything, but being more thoughtful about, for me, making sure that every morning I'm there with my kids, every evening I'm home at the same time to, as best I can, to have dinner with the family, to put our kids to bed, and then pick up where I left off if I have to. But the biggest thing is really prioritizing effective use of time at the office. And it's hard to do. I know we get sucked into things from time to time, and sometimes that's billable, sometimes it's not. But it's just the key thing is being thoughtful about it so that I can maximize the amount of time that I don't have to use, cut into my family time to do the work that I wanted to get done or had to get done. I think that's probably the biggest thing. And then really just making sure that we try to stick to routines. Routines are effectively what are save us. Being committed to those is really important, and that cuts into the quality versus quantity. I'm not flexible with coming home at different times every day and that sort of thing. Like I try to be very rigid, and that helps make sure I have enough time and my expectations are met in terms of the time I have to get what I need to get done.
That's a great place to end. Last year, David McPhillips, who's one of the predominant labor arbitrators in the province passed away. I went to his memorial and his son spoke. And one of them said that he remembered his father as relentlessly parenting. And I think that's really stuck with me, as, you know, a person who had a very, very, very successful career, and was relentlessly parenting. I don't know. I think my kids would probably describe me as relentless. I don't know if they're seeing it in the same rose-colored way that I am. But I can see that both of you are also relentless in your parenting, in your practice. And I really appreciate, I know, like, as we've all talked about, being intentional about how we spend our time is one of the keys to success and survival, frankly. And I love that both of you chose to spend your time today with this. I think to show up as role models at talking about things that folks aren't talking about enough. So thank you, Annika and Joe. Thank you, Allison, who just as a note agreed to do this extremely last minute. I think yesterday or the day before. So is coming here with a lot of courage, and I appreciate that. And thanks to Emma behind the scenes. Annika and I were curious about LinkedIn Live as folks that are on LinkedIn a lot, but weren't quite brave enough to like press the button. And Emma really made this all very easy, and made this all look very good and slick, and really appreciate everybody tuning in today. So thank you very much. Enjoy your Fridays, everyone. And I hope everyone has a sunny weekend coming.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.
Bye.